Yes. Oh, absolutely. And the hardest lesson I've had to learn was something that the hardest lesson I've had to learn, and in regards to the most difficult to figure out. Probably, and I don't know if it would fully make sense because I'm talking about something that I have been studying and meditating and pondering and trying to wrap my head around a full, understanding for years. And I truly, honest to God, have finally come to a conclusion of in my opinion, one of my greatest discoveries that I've, learned, through my spiritual journey and through, like honestly seeking knowledge from God. It was the hardest lesson to learn because it took so long. There was so much that I had to pour through to try and understand this. And it took years and years of prayer and meditation, honestly, just in a way, anguish. When you seek after knowledge, that's what happens to you. People don't understand the price you have to pay to actually receive knowledge at a higher level, right? In personal revelation. Because everyone listening to this needs to understand you can receive personal revelation from God. You can be taught from on high. Doesn't matter what the subject is, by the way. You can be taught any principle or anything from on high. It doesn't have to come from books. Although your ability to seek it out and almost pay the price to earn that knowledge, yes, is what allows you to actually receive it. But the knowledge comes from on high. It comes from God, right? So anyone who wants to seek after knowledge should stop just seeking after it, from a secular level, from listening to me or listening to, any other podcast or reading books. Ultimately, knowledge comes from on high, right? That is really, God reveals things to us. And the hardest lesson that took me the longest amount of time to learn was the difference between my will and the will of God. Because I've always had this understanding, and here's really what this comes down to. What is the difference between my will and the will of God? Because in my opinion, what I know and not even my opinion, what I know to be a fact is that God has given us agency, has given us freedom. And with this freedom comes a responsibility, right? It's a great power that He has given us, honestly, the ability to create. We, as children of God, have been given complete agency to be creators. Both for good or for bad, it is ultimately our choice on how we exercise our power, right? And also to the extent if we do exercise our power or not, right? It is within our will to bring about change in this life. And that is something I know for a fact, that is something I've built, my entire life around, is this understanding of the power we have been given to actually bring about change. However, I feel and have always felt confused by this because it always feels like some people talk about the will of God, right? They talk like I met with people. Like there's one lady who always stands out to me. She goes, "I believe in God. I believe in God every time I go to the parking lot and I say, God, do your thing." Sure enough, a parking spot opens up. And to her, that's faith. To her, that's the will of God. To her, that's blessings from God because she's doing the right thing. And then when it doesn't work out, people always go, "Oh man, for some reason that didn't work out. Maybe it's a test of my faith." We always ask God for things. We ask God for things, we ask for blessings. We ask for Him to help us find our keys, or maybe at a bigger level, help us to, God, please help me to, get over this sickness, right? And I've always wondered about that because there's always two things that happen. One, you get better. Two, you don't. And there's always an answer to that. One, if you get better, it's the will of God. Thank you, God, right? So many blessings. I'm so grateful for God, and like obviously it was God's will, or saved me from the car crash so I didn't die. Oh my gosh, God blessed me. I'm so grateful. And all in all, that's good, right? In a way, like if it increases your faith, nothing's wrong with something that increases your faith and brings you closer to God and Jesus Christ, right? But at the end of the day, and then there's the other side of things where someone who didn't, right? Because how many times we talk about people who experience, great hell, like their wife or husband or whatever it is was killed in a car crash. And we always ask the exact same question: why is God doing this to me? Is God punishing me? Right? Is God, is this the will of God? Am I being tested? Is my faith being tested? And we ask ourselves this question almost as if this idea of everything happens in this world happens for a reason, and it's a test of God. And I don't believe that. I don't believe everything that happens in this world is a test of God, because in all reality, what it comes down to, if you believe in free will, then you cannot believe in fate. people always talk about, oh, it's fate, God already predestined, right? Predestined is another word people throw around. Oh, this was predestined to happen. I was predestined to meet my spouse, right? Oh, who's the one I was meant to marry, right? Who's the one thing that was meant to happen? Nothing is meant to happen. And if you believe in fate, if you believe in predestined, then you cannot believe in free will. And if you believe in free will, you believe in the individual sovereign power of us as beings, as gods, sons and daughters of God, right? If you believe in free will, you believe that God gave us 100% free choice, freedom of agency, right? This is the freedom we have been given as his creation, as his sons and daughters, right? So if we have free will, did he give us 98% free will? So because that 2% of things is God intervening in our life. Like, oh, that was meant to happen, right? Oh, God intervened, he stopped this from happening. It's like, well, did he stop it from happening? Right? Did he stop it from happening? Or does it just happen because it's just a chaotic world we live in? Because we live in chaos. The world, nature, and this universe is chaotic, meaning anything can happen. Tragedy or blessing, right? But what's the one factor that I truly believe ultimately makes a difference? I believe it is us. I believe God has empowered us to make change. I believe God has empowered us and given us agency and will, the power of will, to bring about change, to exercise our faith, to speak, and the mountains will move, as the scriptures teach us, right? But I've always had this battle. For years, I've had this battle of, well, where does God's will oversee mine? Because again, the prayer that Christ taught us is, "Thy will be done." Is that not what we're supposed to seek after? Is, oh, Thy will be done. But to what extent, right? To when is it my will that I bring about change and I fight for the right thing, and when is it God's will, and how do I know the difference? Ultimately, you know what it comes down to? If you're a father or a mother, if you have children, what is it you want for your child? You want them to be strong, independent. You don't want them to be completely reliant on you. You want them to be their own being. If you're to break it all down, you want them to be a good, righteous, strong, healthy, powerful being. And guess what? Is being healthy within our power? Yes, it is. Is speaking things into existence in our power? Absolutely it is, right? Is learning within our power? Is the manipulation of natural elements within our power? Of course it's within our power. Is it also within our power to ask God for knowledge on how to overcome things, as opposed to just simply asking him to overcome it for us? If I were to sit here and say, I'm struggling, God, please change this, right? Is God going to change it on your behalf, or is he going to teach you how to change it yourself? If you say, you're struggling, what if you were to seek after knowledge? And this is what I believe when we say, ask and ye shall receive. It is referring to seeking after knowledge. There is no knowledge that will be hidden from you. It is promised to us there is no knowledge that will be hidden from you, meaning you could learn the secret to all things. You may have to pay a price to learn that secret, but if you can learn the secret to all things, that means you could ultimately obtain all knowledge. And if you obtained all knowledge, would you also then have, all power? Because is that not power? Is knowledge, right? Or at least the potential power to act? If I were so worried about this world, am I to seek after knowledge on how I can be a tool in the hands of the Lord to bring about change and to bring about good? Or am I praying that God will solve it for me? And that's the difference in this battle I always have with people. And what I've come to a conclusion on, that I came to an understanding and ultimately finally received an answer after years of studying this, is that you cannot believe in fate, in destiny, in God's intervention in your life if you believe in free will. What you should believe in is that God will bless you with knowledge. He will help you to see and to have greater understanding, that even if a car crash were to happen, no matter the tragedy in this world, right, in this life, no matter what happens, you can seek after understanding on how to make the best of it or how to overcome. Either way, it is your development that is ultimately the end result if you believe in free will. Most people will get very upset with me for saying this, because then they'll look at the blessings that God has given them and be like, what, you're saying God doesn't bless me? Of course he blesses you. But look at Job, right? The story of Job is always one that's fascinating me. Why would God allow, quote unquote, so many evil things to happen to one man who was so righteous? Even his friends and family kept telling him, oh, you must be doing something wrong if all these things are happening to you. It must be that you're sinning. But what ultimately it came down to is Job's faith was ultimately what mattered the most. His will, that all these things around us have so little meaning, and they honestly do not have purpose, or at least above the purpose of yourself, of who you are and who you have become. That is ultimately the will of God. So, if you're to pray to God and say, thy will be done, you know what the will of God is? Is that you will fight for him on his behalf. You will fight for his cause. That you will seek after knowledge and that you will develop and grow and become a strong tool in his hands. So instead of this belief of, oh, if I do these things, God will bless me, what blessings do you expect? Because what if it doesn't happen? And does it not happen? Absolutely. Oh, is that a test of your faith? You know what it is? It's you not understanding the will of God. The will of God is for your will to be done. I know that sounds blasphemous, but if your will to be done, why didn't God intervene and stop Hitler from killing millions of Jews? Why didn't God intervene? Was there not innocent people there? And people love to throw out this argument against God, and say, this is why, how could God allow all this evil? You know why? Because God allows us choice. And if evil happens in this world, it's our fault for allowing it, or it's our fault for causing it, because there are people who choose evil. And God is not going to override our wills. God is not, because imagine this is something I've always thought of. Hitler was very influential. There's no doubt about it. What if Hitler didn't kill the Jews? What if instead of him deciding to go all out war and conquer the world, what if Hitler used his same power of influence to instead just bring peace to Germany? Right? Bring up the German economy, do business and trade with other nations, and he was extremely influential. Hell, he was Time Man of the Year, Time Magazine Man of the Year. Everyone loved Hitler before it turned to war. He was extremely influential, and he had a choice to make. And he could have chosen righteousness. He could have chosen the light and the good. Instead, he used his own will and his own power to choose the wrong. Because there's a stark difference between someone like, Hitler versus someone like Martin Luther King Jr., right? Both extremely influential, both speaking and moving people. Again, if you're going to argue one versus the other, I'm not talking about character or anything like that. I'm just simply talking about what did they use their will for? What did you use your will for? You were given the power of will. You were also given the power of word. And have you developed the power of your word to speak and to command and to actually influence things for the greater good? That is the will of God. So when you pray and you say, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, it means your will be done in the name of the Father. Your will be done to bring about change. It is your power and your will to bring this about. Ultimately, that has been the greatest lesson and the hardest lesson for me to learn, because there's so much clouding and unclarity around this idea. You can study people who are, high-level pastors. Most people do not understand this. Just because they're a, high-level pastor or someone who, speaks, or whatever for God and, whatever it is. They could speak and it sounds great. You could have a massive church, or you could have a lot of influence by speaking about how God will bless you. But that's lazy. It's not the truth either. Because your blessings are not of this world. Your blessings are of the other world. So if you really are seeking after the blessings of God, you're seeking after the kingdom of God. It's not that God is blessing you with money and wealth. It's within your ability to change that. If you're poor, it's your fault. That's something that people don't want to hear. If you're poor, it's your fault. There is no reason for you to remain and stay poor. You could exercise your will and your authority and your power to learn, grow, develop. I guarantee you can overcome your circumstance if you are willing to work. And it is not God punishing you. It is not your circumstance. No one has power over you. Once you understand your power, you understand the responsibility placed on your shoulders. And most people don't want to hear that. That's also why most people in poverty-stricken areas just seek after just giving away a little bit of money, hoping that God will bless them. You know what? That's not what it's about. That's not what it's about at all. Just because you sacrifice some money and some tithe does not mean God's going to bless you. It means you will be blessed for your sacrifice in the life after, not in this life. There's none of the blessings that God doesn't care if you have a mansion. God doesn't care if you're poor. That should be a great comfort to us all, that it doesn't matter where you live. That is ultimately your choice. It is the knowledge you seek after and who you become, because the blessings are for after this life. Everything in this life is within your power and control. It is. Ultimately, could you not, if we understand the power of faith, you could speak and move mountains. So if you want to make change, learn to speak with the power and authority of God. Learn to speak the power and authority that was given to Moses to split the Red Sea, to bring down fire like Elijah. If you want to stop a tsunami, is there anything stopping you from becoming that person? No, absolutely not. God will not stop you. And that has been something I struggle with, is like, could we obtain that power? And I've come to the understanding that yes, it is within your power to attain that level of light, that level of power and command over the elements, over the world, that you could speak and it would happen. But first you must obtain more light, more truth. Your word must have that kind of strength. So the practice of developing your word through honor and discipline and the practice of your discipleship is how you become that person. If you want to heal the sick, just as the apostles did, how come there are prophets who performed is a better word, performed miracles just like Christ? It's because they obtained light and truth. It's because their word had the power to command even sickness and sometimes death to be gone, right? This is the power that has been given to us all. God doesn't favor one versus the other. He's not going to say, hey, you're not a prophet, you can't do that. It doesn't work that way. Oh, hey, you're not one of the apostles. You're not going to be able to command. Actually, it's not what's taught. What's taught is that every man or woman who has the faith of a mustard seed can command the mountains to move, and it will move. That is the power that's given to us, and God does not intercede. And I believe it is because of that people think, oh, well, it's not God's will. It's like, no, that's an excuse. You're blaming God and using God's will as an excuse for you to not have to seek after the knowledge and become that person. It's always an excuse. And people use God's will as a reason for their suffering. It's not God's will. It's not the devil coming after you. Yes, this is a fallen place. But honestly, would it be if we were all righteous? If we all chose after perfection and we all sought after higher light and truth, would it be this evil? No, it wouldn't. It's evil because we allow it to be. And it's all our responsibility. What happens in this earth is our responsibility. And so it's like, oh, I have no control over the government or what happens. Yes, you do. You have complete power. It is only through that can you actually become and can you actually grow. So, obviously you asked me one question, but they're two different questions, right? For me at least. And those are two things I think of immediately. That was absolutely in my life the hardest lesson to learn. Took me years of study to come to that conclusion, and to not just like be able to say that, but to truly know it and to be revealed to God by God that this is the answer. And then on the other side, that was the most painful lesson. Stop giving away all your trust so cheaply. Stop giving out like it's shit, because then you'll attract the fucking flies.